Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Infrastructure Investment and Inclusive Growth Strategy Board. I'd just like to remind everyone that the meeting's being webcast and that the link to view the recording is on the meeting webpage if anyone wants to refer back to it. For the benefit of the members of the public watching the webcast, members of the Scrutiny Board will be invited to introduce themselves first. We'll then obviously come to introducing officers. So my name is Councillor Hannah Bithell and I represent Kirkstall and I chair this board, and we'll go round to my left. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Councillor Asghar Ali for Gipton and Hare Hills.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Andy Rontry from Kirkstall. I'm here today as a substitute for Councillor Scopes.
Morning, everybody. Councillor Katie Dye, Killenbeck and Seacroft Ward.
Good morning. I'm Isaac Wilson, Councillor in Wheatwood.
Good morning, Councillor Peter Carlill, Calvin Farsley Ward. I'm here substituting for Councillor Leighton today.
Good morning, Councillor Michael Miller, represent Kippax and Methley Ward.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Mohammed Shazad, representing the Moortown Meanwood Ward.
I'm Sandy, Councillor Lay of Otley and Yeadon Ward.
Matthew Robinson, City Councillor for Harewood Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Neil Buckley, All Woodley Ward.
Thank you. And Becky?
Becky Atherton, Scrutiny Advisor to the board.
Thank you. There's a lot to get through today. We've got some big substantive items, so all attendees are asked to be succinct in their questions, comments and responses so that we can get the most value possible from the time that we've got together. Can I ask Becky to go through the items number 1 to 5, please?
Thank you, Chair. Item 1, appeals. There are no appeals against refusal of inspection documents. Item 2, exclusions. There are no items excluded from the public domain today. Item 3, late items of business. There are no late items. Items 4, declarations of interest. Can I ask members to disclose any interests in accordance with Leeds City Council's Code of Conduct? Take silence as none. And finally, item 5, apologies. We have apologies from Councillor Scopes. Councillor Rontry is substituting. Councillor Leighton, Councillor Carlill is substituting. And we've also had apologies from the executive member, Councillor Pryor, today.
Thanks very much. We'll move on to item number 6, which is the minutes of the last meeting. The purpose of this is to approve them as a correct record and take any matters arising. So, Becky, can I ask you to comment on outstanding matters, please?
Yes, Chair. Really just to note minute 18. So members agreed to submit a scrutiny statement on the executive to the executive member summarising the conclusions and recommendations of the board ahead of highways maintenance being considered by the executive board later this year. This has been submitted as requested and was circulated to members on the 4th of September. A copy is also included in your agenda pack as part of the work programme on page 99. Members further agreed a letter would be sent to the Chief Secretary of the Treasury and the Minister for the Future of Roads regarding national funding arrangements for highways maintenance. This has been sent as requested and included at page 107. Both documents will be appended to the Executive Board report on the same subject for the meeting taking place on the 16th of October. If there's any comment on these items, the Chair has asked if they could be taken under item 10 of the work programme, given we've got guests in attendance for the next items. The only other point to note is minute 19 to confirm that Councillor Bithell has provided further comments to Councillor Cooper in relation to community asset transfer as agreed in the meeting in July. I'd be grateful if members could just indicate whether they agree the minutes are a correct record.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So we will move straight on to the mass transit update. I'd like to start by thanking you all for coming along and the time you're taking to engage with us on this. I'm particularly pleased as it is a really pertinent time within it during the consultation for it to come to our scrutiny board. We'll be using this discussion to look at what's been done and help refine the scheme going forward. Obviously, as the consultation is ongoing, no decisions have been made, and this is ongoing till the 30th of September. Members are asked to note that in the report and in the email from Becky, you received links to maps showing potential route options. And as Rob will set out, this project is approaching a key milestone as WICA seeks to identify the route and that will be the basis for the business case, which will soon be submitted. I will invite you all to introduce yourselves, if that's all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Rob Leach. I'm the Interim Director of Mass Transit with the Combined Authority. I'll let the others introduce and then I'll come back.
Thanks, Rob. Good morning, everybody. My name's Tim Lawrence. I'm the Interim Head of Transport Planning and Appraisal for the Mass Transit Scheme, the Combined Authority. So I'm responsible for the business case elements of this.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Saima Alavi. I'm the Head of Public Affairs and Engagement for Mass Transit. So I'm responsible for the stakeholder engagement activity and the public consultation. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Gary Bartlett, Chief Officer for Highways and Transportation at Leeds City Council. So I'm here. My team are working closely with Rob's team on the project and helping out where we can. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. If I can just invite you to do your introductory presentation.
I will. We have a
Thank
presentation.
you.
Becky, could you let me into the meeting so I can share it? Okay, well, look, thank you for your time today. It's much appreciated. We did circulate a paper ahead of the meeting, and what we intended to do is just kind of walk through that. And then, if it's okay with the chair, when we get through the presentation, take questions, or do you want to take questions as we go?
No, if you guys get through and then we'll do a full discussion.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to kind of give you an update sort of on progress to date, and Tim will take you through that. Simon will then talk through the public affairs and stakeholder and public consultation, and then I'll just wrap up with a little bit around the development phase funding and the next steps, and then we'll move on to questions. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Tim.
Okay, thanks, Rob. When we were thinking about how to start this presentation for you, we were acutely aware that perhaps it might be best to kind of just go back a little bit in time, not too far, but just kind of point out what the stages are that we've taken to arrive at the routes that you've seen out for consultation at the moment, to give you an idea of some of the technical work and the decisions that have been made. So we take ourselves back to 2018 in the first instance, where the Combined Authority developed the connectivity infrastructure plan, which you may or may not have had some involvement in. Now, the purpose of that connectivity infrastructure plan was to provide a bridging document between the then local transport plan and the local transport plan that's currently out for consultation. What that connectivity infrastructure plan wanted to do is it wanted to understand movements between settlements, understand if there was a dearth of transport provision, public transport provision, and how that could be improved with the necessary infrastructure. So then we looked at ideas of corridors where we could find the greatest need for transport intervention. At the time, it was across the whole city region. That followed on from the HS2 connectivity study strategy that Leeds was very heavily involved in at the time. So the city region was considered the geography within which we were working. But in order to understand what these corridors were, we looked at a number of different factors. So you're looking at access to the transport network from deprived areas using the indices of deprivation, levels of existing travel demand, opportunities to join up key assets and demand drivers. We talk a lot, I think, in transport terms about areas that perhaps have a dearth of public transport, but where we know there are significant movements that are either taking place or are going to take place as a result of the planned developments, particularly around housing growth. And also this idea now that we need to be a bit more joined up in terms of linking employment opportunities to those areas that perhaps require them more than others. And our old favourite, of course, of rail crowding and road congestion, which places significant burden on our transport network. These two diagrams both come from the Connectivity Infrastructure Plan. On the left, you've got a kind of a settlement hierarchy taken from development plan documents, so your own local plans, for example. And there you can see the size of the shapes determining the density, and of course the size of the settlements as well. So there's a relative proportionality there. When you take that geographic kind of reference, we understand, of course, that West Yorkshire is a polycentric economy, and there's a lot of commuting into Leeds. We get that, a call, but of course, because with Halifax, Calderdale and Wakefield and Bradford being of importance as well, there's a lot of kind of cross-pollination and cross-movements across the districts into those centres as well. So the network within West Yorkshire needs to focus on Leeds as the economic centre, and of course the place where there's a lot of commuting into, but also it's important that we try to think about how we connect up our partner districts as well as the suburbs as well. So it came up with a kind of a potential transport network that was made up of a number of different modes. And I know that's quite difficult to see in the context of this presentation, but you've got a potential mass transit network on top of improvements to the heavy rail network, and then how we overlay what has now become the opportunity for a more malleable bus network as part of the franchising opportunities that we're exploring. Next slide, please. So what I've done here is I've extracted from that rather busy map I planned before the potential mass transit routes that we looked at. Now, bearing in mind these were based on demand or potential demand as well, looking to do that connectivity that rail perhaps doesn't do so well, or that perhaps isn't as suited to bus, and that might be because it's more inter-regional, inter-urban journeys, so longer than a bus, perhaps the requirement to get there slightly quicker, but not necessarily as long as the rail network, because we understand the rail network does fulfil a very valuable function within the transport network. So this introduced the corridor concepts for mass transit network, and they were consulted on. It was intended for public and stakeholder engagement, and there were two consultations on that, statutory public consultations, and as the slide says, that was once in January 2021 and once in October 2022. Now, within that consultation, we acknowledged that the phase one option, the option that we'd like to bring forward first, would be centred on the Leeds to Bradford, Leeds to Dewsbury and Bradford to Dewsbury corridors. That was an acknowledgement, and that was based on the fact that when we did the analysis and the connectivity study that I mentioned earlier on, those were showing up as areas where there was the greatest level of kind of potential demand or unaddressed demand as well, when you look at other things such as regeneration potential and kind of areas of deprivation that may require some forms of improved connectivity. So in October 2023, the mass transit vision was endorsed and it was adopted by the combined authority. Okay, this is quite a wordy slide, and this will be available, I think, to view post the meeting. But as we said, the phase one, the first phase, was consisted of those four corridors that are bullet pointed out in the top half of the slide. So then we come on to how we deal with those corridors and kind of start to define what potential routes there might be within those corridors. So we need to develop a potentially deliverable and operable route options within these corridors. We have a commitment for spades in the ground in 2028, so we have to have some idea that these are deliverable. We need to have a strong evidence base. We need to look at key data sources, and we've got to go through a sifting of multiple route options. And then we have to define some kind of appraisal and modelling framework to inform the overall business case of the eventual routes to progress. So we did that, and that was part of the SOC work, the strategic outline case. For those of you that are perhaps not familiar with the transport business case process, the strategic outline case is very much the first port of call when it comes to looking at government funding. As Rob will explain later on, we do have some development funding for that. We don't have money to build the scheme, so we have to go back to the government at various stages. Our first stage is strategic outline case, where we have to give some confidence to the government that there is a scheme there, that it does provide some form of value for money, that it is deliverable and operable. And it's that level of confidence that we're interested in at the moment. It's not an absolute that this can happen. That comes at later stages in the business case process. This is about providing an indication. So a lot of the work we do and the consultation as well is framed within that concept of providing an indication, but some confidence in that level of indication. So when we appraised these corridors in our modelling framework, some of them had a forecast lower travel demand than others. So we focused on the candidate corridors that were identified as having the potential for a stronger business case for mass transit. And the slide beforehand, if I could just ask you to slip back that. What that resulted in was the Leeds Bradford and the Leeds South Leeds out towards Dewsbury as being the options that were coming forward, that we would take forward for the actual strategic outline case. Thanks, Rob. So we started, it says will continue, that's right, but we started work with our district partners to understand the potential demand, and we looked at future housing, employment regeneration opportunities and aspirations from our district colleagues, and we worked very closely with Gary's team to look at what was happening on the ground, what the future aspirations were for transport schemes as well, and what kind of regeneration opportunities. Because we are focusing on those two corridors to get that Transport and Works Act order, to get those spades in the ground, that is the main focus of our work. But we are really keen to get this as a network. So we're going to revisit this work that we undertook soon, I think would be the right way to say that, and we'll put some timescales to that towards the end of the presentation. And we'll kind of revisit the modelling in a new model to look at the forecast travel demand for other corridors. So I think the purpose of that sentence is just to say, although we're focusing very heavily on the corridors that I just pointed out there, we are going to go back and look again at what other options there are across West Yorkshire. So that takes us really to where we are at the moment. We submitted the strategic outline case to the government that says within the two corridors and along these potential route options here, that there is a viable and operable system that provides some level of value for money. And hopefully you'll have read the consultation documentation, you'll have familiarised yourself a little bit with the routes. Of course, you'll know some of them very well, being possibly through your ward and being as Leeds councillors. So I won't delve too much into the detail. This is more about the process, but I am happy to answer more questions on that as we move forward. So we submitted the strategic outline case to the government, and they were relatively satisfied that it fulfilled the criteria I explained earlier on. But they've asked us to come back, and they want us to do a little bit more work as a result of their investment portfolio decision committee, which was held in May 2024. So what we need to do now is we need to get from those routes that you saw earlier on that we're consulting on at the moment. We need to merge the consultation results with the results of the further work we're going to explain here, and then we can have a candidate preferred option that we can take forward and do a lot more detailed work on, and a lot more kind of analysis on. As we do this, we also, of course, are obliged to look at what we call next best and lower cost alternatives to light rail. The government is very keen to get value for money, as we all are from public spending, and so it advises us to go back and see if there are any other options that mass transit, could something else fulfil the role that mass transit is currently doing. So might that be a guided bus, might that be a much improved bus network. So we have to integrate not just what we're doing in terms of bus franchising, but also potential options around potential other transport options to serve what we think is that demand and that gap in the transport network. We've got some revenue modelling to be undertaken because it's very important that this scheme washes its face from a fare box point of view, if you'll pardon the anachronism. But what we're trying to do there is to show that there will not be a requirement for significant further revenue support from the government moving forward. We want this scheme to be financially viable in terms of the monies that we make from it, or as close to that as possible. We also need to understand a bit more on how much it costs. The first phase scheme costs that we did for the strategic outline case, I appreciate a lot of acronyms in this, were based on benchmarking, albeit with colleagues who have extensive experience in delivering mass transit schemes. But now we're doing a bottom-up cost estimate to get a lot more clarity. And then, of course, there's a high-level assessment of local funding options. Those of you that perhaps read the papers or perhaps listen to some of the announcements from our Chancellor know that she's very keen on leveraging in private sector support or some other form of support for these type of schemes, so the government is not faced with 100% of the bill. So it's very important that we look at the kind of local funding options. Yeah. And then final bullet point, while design of the candidate preferred option will be further developed during the OBC stage, what we hope that by the conclusion of the SOC Plus, and we'll go to the OBC as outline business case, by the conclusion of this stage we're at now, and we'll come to timescales, we'll have more confidence that there's a reasonable process that we're deliverable and value for money option. We'll have used a new modelling suite of packages. We'll have got the bottom-up cost estimates. We'll understand about potential revenue sources as well. So that's just about giving that government that extra level of confidence to build on that they already have. I think I've talked a lot about this there, so I'll maybe perhaps just canter through this at a slightly increased pace. We've got a new West Yorkshire transport model. We spent a lot of money on data collection. We've got a much better idea in the post-COVID situation of how people are moving around the district and why they're moving around the district, how many times a week they're moving around, which is a classic kind of conversation starter, isn't it? How many times a week are you in the office? So we're able to kind of put the scheme in that context, or model it in that context. We're doing a lot more route design development. I talked a little bit about capital expenditure and the operating expenditure to support the economic appraisal, so we can get that more detailed analysis. Really important is the depot site selection. There's going to have to be a rather large building somewhere in the vicinity of the two routes to support stabling, maintenance, staffing, control centres. So there's a lot. There's something there that we need to make sure we've got that confidence in with the government as well, and particularly the site selection process around that will be quite important for us. And then, of course, looking at our park and ride options, and Leeds has got some successful park and ride schemes. And we want to make sure we're not just abstracting from them, but park and ride is a complementary part of an integrated transport system, and in particular of the mass transit system as well. So we've got a little bit of work to do around that. And then there's some, that from the business case point of view, but also from the land, the consenting, and then the environment to make sure that scheme ticks those particular boxes. You know, the public consultation's ongoing. I suspect there'll be some questions around that later on. And what's also important is behind the scenes, we're also having a lot of consultation discussions with stakeholders, which perhaps my colleague Simon can explain later on. The business case process, as set out by the government, is onerous, fun, but onerous. It does rely on a lot of reports to be produced, and it takes a lot of time, consultancy time and staff time, as you'll find out. The development of the scheme before we even get to putting spades in the ground is a significant part of British transport planning and appraisal, particularly English anyway. So there's a lot of work to do around the key deliverables, and I'll pick a couple out there. Of course, you know, we've got the option assessment report, which is the one that goes and says, is tram the answer? I think so we have to have a really strong case for that. I think environmental impact appraisal and carbon management plan are really important now for us more than anything else, particularly carbon. There's the cost of running the scheme. It's electric, may well be electric, sorry, I don't want to presuppose anything there. Are there other options around that? What about embedded carbon when it comes to the construction? There's a lot of concrete involved in this. So we have to understand what our carbon commitment is going to be, not just next year, but also in the future. So there's a lot around that to do. And then the 3 bullet points at the end, again, are the reports that talk about what I've mentioned earlier on. Okay, this is about explaining to you the process, because once we get to outline business case, assuming we do get to outline business case, we're going to have a significant amount of work to do. And a lot of that is around the detail that your constituents, your residents will come to you, they'll see the plans, they'll say, well, hang on, what does this mean for me? How can you explain this to me? What are we going to do about it? And that's where we talk about the development, the detailed engineering inputs. You'll be looking at plans that you're much more familiar with as part of consultation, perhaps 1 to 500, where you see the curb alignments, you see the yellow lines, you see the impact, or not, as the case may be. But also you'll be able to see it in 3D as well. So there'll be earthworks and land impacts, so that'll inform our environmental considerations. So the scheme will be brought to life at that outline business case stage, which perhaps is more of a 2D kind of concept at the strategic outline case. As I said, we get more into the modelling, which is great for me, less great for others. And we just do a lot more kind of detailed work around whole life costs, the operating model, and really important, if we're going to put a tramway in Leeds city centre across new ground on existing highway, we need a legal power on which to do that, and that's a Transport and Works Act order, which will no doubt involve a public inquiry as well. So we have to get legal support to prepare for that application and to understand what happens when we get to an inquiry situation. We've also got statutory consultation, which will be the formal way in which your residents and perhaps the City Council responds to the proposals in that more detailed phase as well. And then, of course, it's a complex programme management, a lot of technical requirements. The three people you see sitting in front here are just the tip of the iceberg in terms of a whole set of machinery that sits behind not just the combined authority, but in our district partner colleagues' offices as well, moving this along at what is a significant pace, I would say, compared to other infrastructure projects of this nature within the UK, in order that we hit that deadline of spades in the ground, but also the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement funding requirements as well, where we'd like to bid for the next round of money, assuming the scheme passes the strategic outline case and that the consultation responses are favourable.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Simon?
Thank you. So Tim's nicely brought us to what we see as that kind of first key milestone.
Oh, sorry, that's not my fault.
Sorry.
So relaxed there.
Thank you, Tim. So Tim's nicely brought us to the key milestone, kind of public-facing stakeholder milestone that we've reached, which is the public consultation. So this is first consultation, options consultation. The consultation commenced on Monday the 15th of July, so it's been running for, in total, it will run for 11 weeks, and we're in the final week, so the last day will be Monday 30th of September. And in this period, we've been at consultation showing details of the those corridors that we are looking that will be the first phase of mass transit, and the route options that we're proposing for Bradford Line and Leeds Line. So we've been out asking members of the public and stakeholders for their views on three elements. So which one of the potential route options from Bradford to Leeds they prefer, which is what we refer to as the Bradford Line, and which one of the potential route options from St James's Hospital via Leeds City Centre to the White Rose Centre is preferred, which is what we refer to as the Leeds Line. And we've also been out asking for people's views on how a mass transit network can be delivered whilst balancing the long-term needs of the environment, which is set out in our sustainability strategy. Information about the consultation has been available on a dedicated web page. The web address is there, and consultees have been invited to provide formal feedback via an online consultation survey, also available in a paper version or by using a dedicated email address. In terms of our approach to engaging with the members of the community, members of the public, we've had a multi-pronged approach really. The aim has been to try and make it as accessible as possible, and to widen the reach as far as possible, so that we can have as many people take part and have their views heard. So as part of all the activity, we've done approximately 30 leafleting events across high footfall locations across Leeds and Bradford. So that's been an opportunity to be in like shopping centres, bus stations. We attended a few summer events that were organised by Bradford Council and Leeds Council, again to be able to get out there and reach the community and give them pass on leaflets and make them aware of the public drop-in events and the ways that they could engage with us. We also did a large consultation promotional leaflet drop at the start of the consultation, so that went to approximately 100,000 postcodes across Leeds and Bradford, again encouraging people to take part in the consultation, and included details of the public consultation events that they could attend, and other ways that they could engage in the consultation. We also sent letters to those who own a property along the route or in close vicinity to the routes, inviting them to take part in the consultation. And we have run approximately 23 drop-in community engagement events over the summer. we've had really good attendance, and it's been great to actually be out in the community and to listen and hear what people's views are. We've also run 3 online webinars. So again, for anyone who wasn't able to join us in person or wanted more information, they could attend and join an online webinar and ask us any questions. Complementing the kind of on-the-ground engagement activity, we've also had a really strong awareness raising campaign that's run from the start for the last 11 weeks. We've done extensive social media activity and out-of-house advertising. So again, trying to ensure that we're raising as much awareness as possible. The online survey has been hosted on our Combined Authority Your Voice webpage. We've also had a consultation brochure produced, which we've been able to mail out to people at request, but had at various events. We also developed a pre-recorded presentation, so that was available online, and it was designed to be inclusive for those with a hearing or visual impairment. So it essentially taught them through the routes and explained what we were trying to achieve through the consultation. And we made the consultation survey available in different languages at request. And we also had the route maps produced as tactile maps as well, again, to make the consultation accessible as possible. In terms of stakeholder engagement and outreach, we've also been doing a lot of outreach activity. We've reached out to a large number of community groups in Leeds and Bradford to raise awareness of the proposals and the upcoming consultation. The groups were invited to share the details amongst their members. So we did quite a lot of extensive communications via email to the groups. And we also undertook quite a few engagement meetings. So again, invited the groups to engage with us and have meetings with us. We extended those engagement meetings as well with key statutory stakeholders. So statutory stakeholders that we need to engage with as part of the the Transport Works Order Act, Act Order. I've said it wrong. And also key stakeholders across transport, business, health and education sectors, so particularly across Leeds and Bradford. In terms of, again, making the consultation accessible and trying to reach as many as possible people who are from seldom heard groups, we did quite a lot of activity on that, which again is going to continue now. So we've established what we call an accessible meeting group, and this is just an internal term that we have. It's made up of members of various faiths, LGBTQ+, young, elderly, disabled, visually impaired organisations from Leeds, Bradford and West Yorkshire. And we've formed the group to gather key insights from them that will help to further down the line feed into the design development of mass transit, but also to help us to ensure that in terms of all the engagement that we're doing, we are able to communicate to those groups in a way that is accessible and is meaningful to them.
Sorry to interrupt, I'll just give you a 5-minute warning on the presentation time, just so we've got enough time to do a discussion. Is that
I'm
right?
nearly done. Yeah, sorry. So we've also, we're continuing to work with our internal EDI team as well and district partners to, again, build that stakeholder list and to get, again, to establish more representative groups. And really, it's just about continuing this work now going forward. I think that's my last slide. It's about continuing this work going forward. We will be doing what we call the lessons learned from the consultation, and then we'll move towards planning ahead for the next consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. I only have 2 slides, so we'll be there, Chair. I just wanted to explain the development funding, but also just explain, there's a couple of numbers in the paper. One relates to the development phase funding, which is the 202 million, but there's also numbers in the paper around the 2 to 2.5 billion. Just explaining the 2 to 2.5 billion, that is currently the estimated capital cost of the Leeds line and the Bradford line. The 202 million is the funding that has been made available to us by government to take the programme through the various stages. Now, to date, we have drawn down from that 202 million, 80.9 million, and of that 80.9 million, we've expended 36 million. So the drawdown that we sought in July was to take us through what we've described today, including the OBC. And what we've also done is we've done a full bottom-up cost estimate to look what we think the estimated cost of completion will be of this stage of development. Now, that is, we're holding at that 202 million. We've got confidence in that. That does actually include some allowance for potential land purchase, albeit we haven't identified any land, an early purchase that's needed, and there's some risk contingency within that number as well. Just in terms of the 202 million, because it's a big number, and I think, you know, we were kind of challenged really to say, well, you know, how does this compare with other major rail schemes, mass transit schemes? So we had our consultancy team do a benchmarking exercise, and what you can see from here, there is a kind of a range of costs of development funding for these schemes. The 202 million as it relates to the 2 to 2.5 billion puts us pretty much slap bang in the middle of that benchmarking exercise. So I think that's kind of comforting in some ways, but it doesn't detract from the fact that we need to spend that money wisely and get the sort of best value from what is being produced in order to support the outline business case and the Transport and Works Act order. And then just finally, to sort of wrap up, so we've got consultation ending in September. We'll be doing a sort of feedback loop to people as to what was said through that consultation and what our kind of key takeaways were. We've got the ongoing environmental assessment works and design work that Tim talked about earlier. We then have another round of consultation on our candidate emerging preferred routes later next year, and we're aiming for an application for a Transport and Works Act order in late 2026. We anticipate that requiring a planning inquiry or a public inquiry, which would take place in 2027, and our current programme is to have spades in the ground by 2028. And as Tim said, that is a really, really challenging programme, but as we sit here today, we're still confident that we can meet that date. And that concludes our presentation, Chair.
Lovely, thank you very much. And thank you as well for, as Chair, I have a briefing prior to the meeting, and I'm really grateful to see a lot of the things that I brought up at the time being brought so that you guys have got as much detail as possible in the board meeting itself. So let's keep things as swiftly moving as possible. I will be closing the item at past. Gary, before we take questions, did you want to comment on anything? Nope, excellent. In which case, I will start with Neil. Councillor Buckley, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I've got several questions, but a comment first of all, and this, it was an interesting presentation. The endless consultation and 9 reports, public inquiry, it's no wonder we can't do infrastructure, isn't it? It is not your responsibility, I realise that, but we're completely bogged down in this process, in my view. Now, government money you mentioned in your presentation. I realise that at the moment you can simply, you've got to rely on what's being told to you. But how much confidence have you got that at some stage the government won't say, no, you can't have it, it's all off? First question. Second question, Dewsbury. Leeds to Dewsbury, Dewsbury to Bradford, lucky old Dewsbury. Why Dewsbury? It seems to me a slightly strange choice in the sense that I went to Dewsbury a couple of months ago, and the centre of Dewsbury was completely hollowed out. There was no business, no people, nothing. Now, Wyker, have you got the capacity to carry out all this work at the same time as bus franchising? Have you got the officer capacity? And have we got a guarantee that money is not... Last question, Chair. You said that the scheme had to be financially viable. Well, what does that mean? What does it mean? Does it mean that the costs have to come in at a certain level? This is the cost of building the scheme. And who's going to operate it? Does that come into financial viability? And what's the anticipated ownership of that? I'll leave it there, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Buckley. Would somebody like to respond?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. I'm just conscious of time. So I think on endless consultation, I think I wouldn't necessarily subscribe to the view that we shouldn't be consulting, but I do take the point that you make around the volume of what we need to do in the process. There has been a review instigated around the Transport and Works Act order process by government, which we are feeding into. So that's welcomed. But the fact of the matter is that we just have to comply with what the current process is. In terms of confidence in government support, not an easy question to answer. I think all what that we can do and what we are doing is ensure that at a programme sponsor level, so with the Department for Transport and Treasury, that we have the right people around the table, that we are keeping them informed and bringing them along in a kind of an agile way to ensure that they understand the process that we're going through, understand the gateways, understand as kind of the issues arise that we kind of work together. And we've got a really firm commitment at Director General level from the DFT, and we had a meeting with the DG last week on that point to kind of around ways of working, not only with DFT, but also with Treasury as well. So as I say, I can't second guess what central government will do, but we're doing all we can, I suppose, to ensure that we maintain those relationships. I'll hand over to Tim in a moment, but just on the Wyker capacity, so the way that the programme is set up at the moment is we have a blend of Wyker officers, and we're building, trying to build significant capability within the Wyker organisation. That is an ongoing process, and to date has been successful in bringing certainly the senior roles into post, and then now we've got the senior roles in post, then we'll be recruiting to build a kind of organisational capability over what's going to be 10, 15, 20-year programme of work. So there's a real commitment to do that. There is a need to use technical consultants to do some of the work, but the idea is that that will reduce over time as we build the capability within the combined authority. And that is, you know, from my experience having done this with other authorities, both in the UK and in Ireland, the ones that have done it most successfully have built that capability over the years and become less and less reliant on consultancy support, and that's certainly the model that we're bringing forward. And just in terms of what does financially viable mean, well, we have to pass a sort of certain tests in the business case around affordability, around the kind of the economic benefits and the benefit to cost ratio. So that's all set out very clearly in the guidance that we have to follow. And then in terms of the operation, which is a good question, we, as part of the procurement, we will be procuring an operator. There are different models in the UK. So Edinburgh, for example, the operations is done in-house. It's an arm's length company of the City Council, who are the promoters of the Edinburgh Tram scheme. In other cities, such as Manchester, it's a kind of franchised arrangement. And we'll be looking at all those options ahead of making any final decisions. On the Dewsbury point, I'll just hand over to Tim and he can answer that.
Thank you. So very briefly, I think Rob will manage to answer 4 questions at a time. It will take me to answer 1. Our mayor wants us to be a West Yorkshire-wide network and not focusing solely on Leeds. which is why the first set of corridors that were introduced in one of the slides, the orange ones, did include Dewsbury. I wasn't clear, and I apologise that as we were moving forward with the analysis work about demand, Dewsbury was parked. The Combined Authority report of the 13th of March 2024 does go into a bit more detail around that, but as a result of that parking, it wasn't taken forward as part of the phase one, so it's not part of the phase one. If you remember looking at the final plan that I showed, which just stops at White Rose, but there is a commitment by the Mayor and the Combined Authority, in agreement with Kirklees, to investigate options from the White Rose to Dewsbury, but that's a commitment just to investigate options as part of an initial transport study. So Dewsbury's not in the first phase. It has been parked, it's back in the mix with everything else, but it does have a commitment for a transport study to investigate not just mass transit, but what other forms of transport might be applicable to that area.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Rowntree?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks very much for the presentation. I should say, actually, I'd come with a number of questions which you've answered, which obviously I'm very pleased about. That will certainly save myself and yourselves some time. There were a few things that outstanding that I did want to ask, particularly about terminology and how we the terms that we use talking to the public about this. I have a feeling that in most people's minds now, mass transit equals trams and trams equals mass transit. And I suspect that from what we've been saying this morning, that that's not strictly true. I mean, there are other sort of technologies that would go with it, come under the name of mass transit. And I think in guided busways, and we mentioned light rail and tram train, although I know the experience of Rotherham hasn't been entirely happy in that regard. But just also terminology-wise, we seem to be using the word tram in terms of the current proposals for what 20 years ago we might have called super tram. I don't think is that a fair comment, perhaps. Just so we could have a bit of clarity on that. But the one thing that I would like to ask, how did we actually come to the decision that trams is the right solution for the routes that are now out to consultation? I mean, if you could give us a bit on that. And finally, when we speak about consultation, I'm just wondering, it's at this stage whether you've identified any particularly active anti-groups, because I'm conscious at the time of the new generation transport consultation a lot of years ago, there was one particular sort of organisation whose sort of antics I thought were rather disruptive, and there didn't seem to be a strategy for taking them on and answering them. And wonder if you could speak a bit about that, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim will take the question around tram, and then Simon will come back on the question around the groups.
Thank you. The terminology, I think, is quite... we thought a lot about the terminology when it came to writing the vision, and I take us back a lot in this conversation to the mass transit vision. It's a really useful document in terms of setting that scene as to where we are. The mass transit network will have the opportunity, depending on affordability and viability, to be served by different modes of transport. So I think what it's saying is, if you pardon the kind of the acronym, horses for courses for a little while, depending on levels of demand, spacing between the stops, speed that you need to get up to the market you're serving. So the mass transit network allows us some flexibility within choice of mode within that. Why are we doing tram? It's a combination of a number of different factors. This is the most heavily demand-orientated route. So trams are very good for that type of serving that type of market. There were commitments from the then government in various policy and command white papers that Leeds was getting a tram. So we started from the process that the tram is the most appropriate form of transport, given the constraints, the opportunities and the demand. and that there was government backing for it. But the business case process that I talked about as well doesn't let us just say, well, because you said it's tram. We have to go through and look at other options as well within, not just the network, but within the routes we're looking at. So that's why we do a next best and a lower cost option as well. I'm being told that's it. Good.
I think so. I'm just conscious of time.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just with regards to the question about consultation and anti-groups and if we've had any communication with any anti-groups at this stage in terms of this first options consultation, we haven't engaged with any. However, in terms of the stakeholder engagement activity that we're doing, we're confident that we've got a good understanding of all the different types of community groups that are out there, including stakeholder groups and campaign groups. So our aim really is to reach out to them initially and talk to them and build those relationships with them as we go on. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got 7 minutes left, guys. So, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. The Transport and Works Act order, just adding to Councillor Buckley's point, but pressing on it a little bit more. You said that undertaking a review, I think, does it essentially duplicate previous kind of consultations? Can we, as a committee, for example, also kind of aid in that if we feel that there is duplication there? Can we, pull out what that is and make that point to the minister or whatever? Or actually, if it's not duplicating it, then, sometimes you can look at a list of consultations or whatever and think this looks like overkill, but when you get into it, you realise sort of why it's important. But if there is actually just duplication there and it's slowing the process down and costing us money, this is really important that we do. So I think it should be something that we're not afraid to follow up on.
Yeah, I think the issue really around timescales is probably more related to decision making and convening what needs to be convened at the appropriate time and within timescales that are sort of suitable and progress things. From our perspective, the next round of consultation will be very, very different to what we're doing today, and it will be at a level where if it is adjacent to your property or it's outside your shop, we will have, full engineering drawings that people will be able to pore over, understand exactly what the impacts are on them, of course, what the benefits are as well. So the next round of consultation is necessary, not just as a sort of tick the box and get through consultation. From our development of the scheme perspective, it's going to be really important that we hear what people say. But in terms of that kind of wider point around opportunities to lobby or to, have conversations around ensuring that that those kind of timescales are adhered to, or indeed improved, then I think that the more people who are having those conversations, the better place will be in to deliver kind of major infrastructure programmes.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thanks, Chair. I'll ask the questions. You choose which ones you answer, and hopefully you can write back to me on the other ones because this is being recorded. So online it says trams are on the way. So trams are our first preference, and it's basically tram or bust rather than bus, it feels like at the moment. You mentioned what the costs are in development being within the margin of error that's there that you set out and what is aligned to other schemes. What's been factored in the costs for overrun? Because infrastructure projects always overrun. Edinburgh was mentioned, famously overran, and so I'd be interested in what's been factored in terms of that. Am I right in looking at the map that only one of the routes goes to Ellen Road football stadium that's there and actually goes past it? 2 go through. There's nothing in the consultation on stops, so are we expecting that in the next round, or should we get some more information today? And how are we thinking about what we do in terms of bespoking this? Is this going to be bespoke, or is it going to be similar to technology that's being used in, say, Greater Manchester or Edinburgh? Again, when you bespoke it, it costs more, when you can use it, and you can chop and change carriages between other routes. And on that, are we looking at things like driverless technology and automation when we seek to deliver this?
Okay, I think we can answer all those questions. So just yeah, well, I think in terms of the development costs and overrun, it's an absolutely valid point. And you know, the UK light rail market has notoriously been bad at delivering these projects on time and on budget. What's interesting is that in Edinburgh, the second phase was actually delivered on time and on budget, and there were a lot of lessons learned. And we've got a lot of people in the team now who were on that second phase of Edinburgh who are kind of advising as to what was done. So that's very helpful. So in specific response to the question, under the guidance by government, we keep coming back to this, but we do have to make an allowance for what's called optimism bias within the assessment of the costs. So we add a percentage, which is a fixed percentage set by government, which over time then diminishes while we do more risk work and develop our kind of risks and costed risks, which then become the contingency. So there's a really good methodology for it. What you tend to find that happens on these programs is that it doesn't get applied properly, or when it's diminishing optimism bias and increasing the contingency, that's not done in an appropriate way. So we're very alive to that. But as I say, it's a very good question. There'll be a lot of scrutiny around that, given the history of light rail in the UK. Just in terms of the bespoke nature, no, we're not looking at something bespoke. We're looking at something which is kind of on market norm. There is a debate going to be around battery operated and overhead line, and you know, there's a dual system in Birmingham that works very well, where there's no overhead lines in the city centre, but it runs on overhead lines outside. So that's a kind of a conversation that we're having now, and particularly with district partners. I don't envisage there being anything being brought forward which is extraordinary and outside the norm, and that's again for the reasons that you say, in order to kind of maintain that affordability. In terms of stops, we will be consulting on stop locations as part of the next round of consultation, and that's part of the development work that we are doing. Ellen Road, I think you answered that, did you, Tim? Yeah. There's two run through there, and trams are on the way. Yeah, go on.
I think there's possibly a number of different ways of answering this question. On the website, I think it says trams are on the way. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not disputing that. I'm not disputing it says that. But a number of different ways of answering the question that you posed, which was, is it trams or bus? So the quickest way to say is that's a political argument, I think, as much as it is a technical argument. We can do as much as we can on the business case. We can make the best case we can collectively. There's a funding package around that has to be determined by central government, and if central government makes a determination that perhaps they don't think tram is the affordable option, and then it might be something else, then as a collective, don't we all have to decide, particularly as a political point of view, whether we want that?
Yeah, I'm certain they will. I'm certain
Good.
They will.
Yeah, I think for absolute clarity, we are promoting this as a tram.
Yeah.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Lay, time has beaten us, I'm afraid. So I've got some questions too. Do you want to email them to me, and I'll add them to mine, because I'm going to email some questions across as well. And the same for other people. If there's any further questions that spring to your mind, I'm sure the team are more than happy for us to smash that across in an email early next week. Lovely. Thank you so much for coming, guys. Is there any closing remarks from any of you? No? Quite content? No? Lovely. In which case, the recommendation is just for members to note the contents of the report. Nothing from that discussion really came out that you wanted the board to act on in terms of any official sort of scrutiny work after. So we'll just re-invite you guys back moving forward. Alrighty. Thank you. We'll just take a moment now to switch all the officers out. Thank you. Okay then, folks, thank you. I'll bring us now to item number 8, which is Vision Zero 2040 annual update. This scrutiny board's had a long-standing interest in the numbers of those killed and seriously injured on Leeds roads and has been very supportive of the partnership approach to Vision Zero from its outset. As a minimum, we receive updates twice a year on KSI figures as part of our performance monitoring. However, following the launch of the Vision Zero strategy, members also committed to receive an annual update on progress towards the ambitions of Vision Zero. For any member of the public who may be watching the webcast, the Vision Zero strategy sets out the ambition that by 2040 no one is killed or seriously injured on the roads in Leeds. This is very important to me personally, and I know a number of us will have had our lives touched by road death and injury. I'd like to take a minute to reflect on the human cost of the work in this paper and the impact our scrutiny can contribute to this work. We regularly as councillors analyse data on a page, but today I want us to remember that each one of these numbers is a person, someone whose life has been changed in an instant, or whose family have a hole in their lives. This isn't data, this is our community. And I'd like to request that if you're able, that you please join me in standing for a minute's silence to remember those we've lost on roads, not just here in Leeds, but across the UK and wider world before we begin. Thank you. Thank you. Before we begin, I also want to remind members about the importance of language when we're dealing with this topic. Previously, parent campaigners powerfully highlighted the importance of avoiding the term accident to describe road traffic collisions, so that we are always clear about the cause of collisions and their human cost. Can I ask members to be mindful of this during our debate today? And I'd also like to note apologies from Dr. Ian Greenwood for today's meeting. Ian has kindly provided a written contribution which can be found on page 83 of your agenda packs. The board have already introduced, so if I can move to officers and guests introducing, and if we start with Alison. Thank you.
You see, I've forgotten, it's so long, I've forgotten. Yeah, we are working together as a team to eliminate road deaths and KSI and seriously injured by 2040, to have them by 2030, so we've got a lot to do. We have adopted the Vision Zero whole systems approach, which the team will go into more details about, because we know that actually we can prevent people dying on our roads if we address those key determinants such as road design, behaviours, education, and work with manufacturers to improve car design, for example. So there's lots of work that we want to do together, and we're really proud that we've been able to launch this West Yorkshire-wide strategy. When Tracy and I came into office, each local authority was working independently of each other on their own Vision Zero strategy. I have to say Leeds was furthest ahead out of all the local authorities and was very close to publishing their own Vision Zero strategy, and the others have caught up or are catching up. But the ability to have that West Yorkshire-wide oversight, I think, has really accelerated the progress, and the partnership, I think, is benefiting not just West Yorkshire but Leeds and other constituent parts of the county. So I will go to Neil, who is the paid officer lead for Vision Zero, paid out of the West Yorkshire Camera Safety Partnership, because they have recognised as a partnership how important it is to have dedicated people to do this job. So Neil's been taking the lead on Vision Zero's behalf about a year. I think he's been here about a year now. Just over a year, and he's got all the detail, and then we're really happy to answer any questions, and I'm sure that we'll also hear from other members of the partnership, because we've done a lot of work which we're really proud of. Neil.
Yeah, thank you, Alison. So Neil Hudson, I'm the policy manager for Vision Zero. I sit within the combined authority, but as Alison said, I'm funded through the Safety Camera Partnership, working with each of the partners of the Vision Zero wider partnership. As Alison has said, in Leeds, very much forging the way and pushing further forward than others, and we're using some really positive practice to extend that to other areas of West Yorkshire to try and keep people safe. So I'll pass across to Gary.
Thanks, Neil. I'm Gary Bartlett. I'm Chief Officer for Highways and Transportation at Leeds City Council. I also chair the officer group that meets at a West Yorkshire level.
Hello, I'm Lorna Crabtree, so I'm the Partnership Inspector for Leeds Districts. I picked up this portfolio about 6 months ago, so I deal with all the local MPTs. I assist with Operation Spark and the local operations.
And good morning, Jonathan McNiff, Chief Inspector Partnerships for the West Yorkshire Police for Leeds Partnership in Leeds.
Good morning, I'm Paul Jeffrey. I'm the Head of Department for West Yorkshire Police Prosecutions and Casualty Prevention Unit. I've got operational responsibility for traffic prosecutions across West Yorkshire. I'm the operational lead for the West Yorkshire Safety Camera Partnership from a policing perspective, and I sit on the various boards associated with the delivery of Vision Zero.
Good morning, Nicholas Hunt. I'm the Traffic Engineering Manager for Leeds Council, and I'm the Vice Chair of the West Yorkshire Camera Partnership.
Morning, Gillian MacLeod. I'm the Head of Transport Development at Leeds City Council, and I chair our Leeds Vision Zero partnership.
Good morning, Rosie Revel, Road Safety Team Leader for Leeds City Council, leading on our delivery of the Vision Zero Action Plan.
Thank you. Can I invite Gary to make some introductory comments, please?
Thank you, Chair. Alison has set the West Yorkshire scene. I'm just going to quickly go through, if you like, the more local position. And I'm going to be very brief. There's a comprehensive report in front of you of many, many pages, and I'm certainly not going to go through that. So, as you said, Chair, this is one of our regular reports to this board, giving you an update on the work that we've done in Leeds, but also the partnership work that we've done as well. I would draw out the table in paragraph 4, which shows some positive signs of improvement in terms of casualty reductions. Just to pull out 13 fatals in 2023, 27 in 22, 493 killed and seriously injured in 23 versus 556 in 2022. I state those figures, but obviously the context that you applied it at the beginning of this session is really important here, and what that means for the individuals and families concerned. We are pleased with these positive signs, but we're also very cautious. Experience teaches us that certainly when it comes to fatal collisions, statistically they are low numbers and they can change very rapidly in the year. And indeed, in the last month or so, we've had several on Leeds' roads. So those figures will change, but nevertheless, there are positive signs that the work that we're doing is starting to have an impact. And it is a noticeable change in comparison to others across West Yorkshire and indeed nationally. And that's not gloating, that's about factually just reporting where we're at, but it's very much in the context of let's be cautious but encouraged by what we're doing. Why are we seeing these positive signs? I think there are a number of issues that I'd probably bring to the board's attention, and the most important one is the partnership reflected in the groups that are here. I think the partnership has come closer over recent times, headed by Alison, and is now making real strides, not just in Leeds, but across West Yorkshire, and I would say nationally as well. starting to spread our wings further. We're getting the message out to as many as possible in terms of highlighting the issues by comms and press releases and events that have been held, trying to educate drivers that ultimately, and all people that use the highway, that they have a responsibility to take care and not rely on others to do it for them. If you're a car driver, you are in control of your right foot, for example. I think the pledge work that's been done, and I know a lot of members here have signed up to the Vision Zero pledge, and we may come back to that at some point in the meeting to encourage others that haven't to do the same. I think enforcement that's articulated in the paper, particularly around more flexible deployment, average speed cameras and community cameras, has been really helpful to making sure that we get our message out that we want people to use the roads carefully. Areas for assistance, just in case that might be of interest, keeping it local, I think it's really important that Leeds City Council are the example, or set a really good example when it comes to Vision Zero. So all our services and teams need to own Vision Zero, and I think there are pockets of that, but I think more services and teams need to own it, if I'm being brutally honest. And some of our partners as well, particularly perhaps in public health, and I think Dr. Greenwood mentioned that in his letter. If all partners are fully engaged and using their influence, I think together we're going to make a real difference. So, Chair, I'm going to keep it there because there's a lot in the report and I'm sure members have got a lot of questions.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's perfect. Is there anyone else that would like to make introductory comments before I bring members in? No, we're all comfortable? Okay. Councillor Wilson, thank you.
Thank you for the report and your presentation. I've got a couple of questions. I really like the emphasis on communications in the work that you do. Not everything's about engineering. I think it's really important. You talk about, I think your communications is through your kind of X and Facebook pages, and also in-person events. Have you got plans to go a bit further on that? Because I think, you know, if you, particularly on the social media side of things, if you're doing it on the Facebook pages for connecting Leeds and stuff, those are still pages that people, probably they're going to see that content if they follow you and a few others, whereas I think a relatively small investment into ads online, also potentially working with like local influencers and people to spread the message could reach a lot more people, and perhaps particularly, you know, the people that we want to reach with this. So just to kind of probe on that really, I suspect we could go quite a lot further in the communication side of it, with a reasonably small investment compared to like engineering investments or whatever. And then the second question was about cameras. Again, I really like that we're making progress on more flexible camera deployment, kind of innovating around that. I've been really pleased with that in Leeds. I personally would like to see more liberalisation of the rules around cameras. I think we should be residents beg for cameras often on roads where they perhaps don't meet the criteria, but there's a real feeling that they're not safe. And I just don't understand why we have such strict rules around it. I believe those rules are national, is my understanding. If that's not the case and we have power over it regionally, I'd like to see us change those. If that is the case, then I'd like to see us lobbying very hard for us to have the freedom to decide where speed cameras go. And I know that sometimes there are sensitivities around that. People don't want to feel like they're being kind of squeezed for money on the roads, but reality is if they're being squeezed for money, it's because they're speeding or making illegal movements or whatever. So I personally don't buy that argument at all. And I think in terms of it's such an important public health issue that we should just go beyond that. You know, that argument I just don't think stands. So those are my two questions. And on the camera thing, I'd just like to hear what you're doing to sort of, perhaps you disagree with me, but if you don't, what you're doing to get more freedom around where we can place cameras.
So I'll come in on the first question in terms of the communication side of things. One of the things that has changed since we last came to the board that I last attended is we now have a comms officer as part of Vision Zero partnership, and they are pushing out a lot of messages. You flagged up about X and Facebook quite rightly. We are also active on Instagram. We also do put out messages on other platforms as well. So we use DAX, so if you were to use digital content online, the sort of adverts that would come up, we do go into that field as well. We advertise on local radio, so for example, Heart FM, for example, and there is an awful lot more that we are pushing with. The strategy itself and the launch, there was an awful lot of work from the comms perspective to get to that stage, but we have a lot of opportunity to move that forward, as you quite rightly say. Yeah, absolutely. In terms of influence, we are working with a number of them. So we actually work with First Car as well, which is an online TikTok platform. So there's a whole host of elements that we are already picking up and do plan to work further. We have also set up a comms group for the partnership to do that very thing. So do support exactly what you're saying. We are certainly on with it. I'm going to throw one back to you and say to all the councillors present, please do make sure that you are working with us on social media, and please do share the content, because you also have a very wide reach, and if we're not getting to those people, then I believe that you can help us to do that. So please do. It's all about saving people's lives.
Just very quickly on the camera side, there are national guidance, and collectively that was going to be reviewed at a national level. That is still in play, and it's taking time to come out. We collectively took the decision to amend the guidance in West Yorkshire to allow us this more flexible approach. It is a fine line, as you say. Many years ago, there were some authorities further down south who took a very liberal approach to speed camera, safety camera deployment, and that led to many complaints about this is just revenue raising, which then fed back into DFT and government and caused a reaction at that level that's led to that position. So, but Paul, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, thanks very much, Gary. You make an absolutely key point around the use of safety cameras generally, both for speed and red light enforcement. I think we're in a really much stronger position here in Leeds and indeed West Yorkshire, because in February last year we took the bull by the horns and we revisited that national guidance and acknowledged as a partnership that it was inadequate in terms of addressing identified risk here in West Yorkshire. It was restrictive in that it encouraged the use of camera enforcement only at locations where somebody had died or had suffered serious injury, and there was definitive evidence that that was as a direct result of poor speed compliance. Now, we knew we had significant numbers of locations across our communities where there was heartfelt concern about the risk of tragedy happening, but by the grace of God it hadn't yet occurred. We were powerless, we felt, under the terms of the national guidance to address that. So as a partnership, we took the bull by the horns and said, enough waiting for the guidance to change, let's look at the spirit of the guidance but actually adapt it to the real world that we live in today, and that's just what we did. So last year we launched a guidance which retains the use of cameras at what we call core sites where collisions have occurred in the past and we know there is a speed compliance issue. But we've broadened the scope of how we use this technology. We've introduced the use of average speed enforcement, which you'll have seen on the Stanley bypass and the Leeds Outer Ring Road. But most significantly for me, we've directly addressed the point that you raise, and that was in relation to our inability under former guidance to respond to community concerns. Now the public can, through the council or indeed police or any other stakeholder in the partnership, raise concerns about location. We will look to validate those concerns with some traffic flow monitoring data. I struggle to think of an example where we've had a genuine concern expressed to our analyst who has turned around and said no, it doesn't actually meet the new criteria that we have in place for deployment. So it's much more flexible. We've got 49 sites currently in the Leeds district alone that we're routinely deploying mobile speed cameras, and we've adapted our fleet of mobile enforcement vehicles now, so we have smaller vans which are capable of enforcing comfortably in urban settings where the parking opportunities are much more restricted. That's gone down really well. Now, I know I can feel you bristling perhaps when I'm talking about the use of criteria. The reason we had to apply some criteria, albeit at a lower level, is for a quite specific reason. Speed enforcement using cameras polarises public opinion, and we want to do this with the public, not to them. Now, by retaining a criteria which is much more flexible, we strike the right balance between being more responsive to identified risk from a public perception point of view and retaining public confidence in the fact that our operation isn't just to, fall into the cash cow type model. It's actually justified on the basis that we can confirm through the traffic flow monitoring that the public perception is actually supported by some hard data. So that's where we are today, and I really encourage you to feed those concerns through so we can collectively do something about it.
And can I just add that it's called Community Alert. You should have it on your website. Here, every local authority should have a route to Community Alert, so you can tell the public when you're going out and about. If you've got an issue with the road, follow the Community Alert process. If enough people raise that alert, it goes through the system that Paul's just described. The politicians on the Vision Zero board really agitated for this change, so we're really delighted. Use it because it's brilliant, but also it's a fallacy to say that cameras don't cost. We can't just keep putting cameras wherever we want to. There's actually a cost to cameras, and local authorities have got to meet the cost for those cameras. And yes, they generate income, but we don't keep all that income. A lot of that income goes elsewhere, so it's got to be a balance between keeping the public happy, keeping the public safe, but also affordability.
Thanks very much. And a particular thank you on your work around amending those rules and regulations around the camera. I know it's made a huge difference, those average speed checks. Councillor Carlo.
Thank you, Chair. I think, you alluded it to there, didn't you, Alison, really, that the politicians in the room hear this all the time, and it's probably one of the biggest issues raised. Road safety is one of the biggest issues raised with councillors. Certainly in my ward, I think it's the biggest issue I hear. I was going to just note on Paul's comment there about speed cameras, I'm not entirely sure it does polarise opinion from my mailbag. Anything I say, there's a few people who think it's wrong, even if I were to tell you that grass is normally green, there'd be a few people that would argue online that it's not the case. And I think it probably is a very small minority that don't like speed cameras and the work they do, as we've seen probably from the work you alluded to on the Stanningley bypass and on the roads past Dawson's Corner in my ward that I know yourself and I have worked on, Chair, over many years. And I think it's that length of time we've worked on things like that I guess it's a bit of a question for Gary. This one is around, all of us will have heard of many times around schemes that would work in our wards and that residents want to see. But how do we make sure there's the capacity within the service to deliver those at pace? So there's smaller schemes such as pedestrian crossings, some of the kind of enforcement we can now do around red light cameras and whatever that I know people will want to see in. The budget is often very limited on those. I know when we're thinking about schemes, even quite small things such as additional repeater signs in for 20-mile-an-hour areas can take months to come out on the ground. And there's a backlog of a number of works, and then larger schemes like we talk about there can take many years for councillors to be raising them, and then for them to be reviewed, and then to get on a list, and then for them eventually to get to the top of that list. Now we have the vision in place, which I think we would all completely support, and things like the more flexible speed camera guidance, which allows us to do more of what we want to do. How are we making sure there is that capacity so that we can say, right, well, yes, now we can do 3 times as many pedestrian crossings as we were doing before, because we know we need to do that because of the vision. How can we fit all these speed cameras in? How can we get more of those sites for concern ticked off the list than we were previously to make sure that we're really acting on the vision?
Thank you, Councillor Carlill. I think there are two aspects to that. I think one is surety of funding, long-term funding. So some years ago, it used to be on an annual allocation basis, but latterly we've now moved into the City Regional Sustainable Transport Settlement. Thank you. Used to the acronym CRSTS that we use. And so that's given us a 5-year level of funding, which is helpful. We're awaiting for the next CRSTS 2 to be confirmed and detailed. So that will give us another 5 years. And I think that allows then local authorities to start looking at teams, particularly you're talking about teams in traffic engineering in Nick's team here, so to make sure that they are resourced up. And the second point is then finding the relevant staff and the quality of staff to do that work, which is always a challenge because, the limited, it's just the amount of work, the demand for work that they have, it far outstrips the supply of resources and money. You look at the size of the city, we get many requests for the major schemes, cameras, but we also get down to the very detailed work at a very local level, and it could be a drop crossing outside number 10 High Street. But all these have a road safety aspect. So there are thousands of these, and Nick and the team have to juggle those and prioritise those. So I in summary, I think things have vastly improved because we're now getting surety of funding over a longer period. We'll see what happens with the comprehensive spending reviews and various other reviews on major schemes that are taking place at this precise time, and we know the reasons for that. And then hopefully when we come out the end of that, we're in a stronger position. We know what funding we've got and we can resource up accordingly. I know Nick and the team, and you've certainly, in terms of CRSTS1, you're making good progress with all the schemes. They're all out or about to be implemented. Do you want to say a few words on those?
Yeah, just to add on what Gary said, previously our allocation was annually, and therefore we couldn't really long-term forecast of what we're able to deliver. Now we've got a 5-year allocation, we can plan in advance. So at the moment, all of our works for this year has been issued, and we're designing works to be issued early next year. So we're ahead of the game. So rather than getting the funding allocation in April and starting the design process, we're starting that design process earlier. So at some stage, if other funding opportunities present itself, we will have schemes that are shelf ready to go. So hopefully that shows that we are changing how we deliver and design work packages moving forward.
And can I add that we monitor this at a Vision Zero board at West Yorkshire-wide level, and Leeds is performing best out of all 5 local authorities. So I think that's about, the speed at which Leeds is able to work at, and the capacity and obviously competence, and there are struggles in other bits of West Yorkshire which we're working with, but you've got no issues here in Leeds.
Thank you. Councillor Dye.
Thank you. Excuse me. So a few things I picked up from the report that I just want to bring up, but before I do, just to say that I also really welcome the change in the scope of the guidance. I think that's really, really important, and certainly will be helpful to some of the things that we've been talking about, of spots that we've identified in our ward. So the first thing I wanted to pick out from the report was the issue of schools, which I know we come back to again and again, but there are real hotspots around school pickup and drop off and parking. So it's just a plea really, if there's any extra funding that can be found for enforcement. I know in my ward our PCSOs do a really good job of trying to be where they need to be, but really they need to be everywhere at the same time, and they can't be. So if there's anything that can support us around the city in enforcing people who constantly put children in danger with irresponsible parking, speeding around schools, that kind of issue. The second thing was about a couple of references to new drivers, particularly young new drivers in the report. And one of them that I picked up was the One Life Lost campaign, and the other one was mentioned in the report on page 43 about interventions that have been delivered in settings across West Yorkshire with young drivers. I think that's really important, getting that safety message around. I think they're a crucial group. I don't know whether you have the data, well, I'm sure you do, but I don't know whether you've shared it in the report. I can't remember about where do young drivers sit as a particularly vulnerable group, but I would imagine it's probably quite high, and therefore any interventions are welcome. So my second question was, is there the capacity to expand that scheme? It would be great if we could deliver it to more new and potential new drivers. And the other one was something in the report, can't remember where it was now, about nuisance bikes. And I know that is an issue in many wards and causes a danger to all of the road users. So I just wanted to ask what kind of work is being done, and to say particularly thank you actually for the work that's been done in my ward, where we have seen a real change. But I wondered what was happening across the city. Thank you.
This might be a combined effort with some colleagues around the table. The issue outside schools is obviously very local in Leeds, but also affects most schools in the region and probably nationally. I've worked in a number of authorities and it was exactly the same. And this is part of the reason why comms is such an important factor, because sometimes you think that people are trying to preserve their tin more than care for the environment around them and the children that are walking and cycling and wheeling to school, and that can't be right. So it's about everybody taking responsibility and thinking, what am I doing here? Is there another way? And yes, there are things that we can do as a highway authority, working with colleagues, and we do school streets, we do a lot of education, we try to work with a lot of schools. Some schools don't have the capacity to work with us, that's another thing. But we are more than open to continue our work, and I know colleagues will give you examples if need be. Paul, did you want to come on the capacity to extend the scheme comment that was made?
Sure, thank you, Gary. I think it's really important that you perhaps appreciate the importance that the partnership applies to not just enforcement, but the benefits that engagement and education give us. The Young Driver scheme is delivered by the same company that provides the out-of-court education to speeding motorists. If you get a speed awareness course offer from the police, a company called TTC provide that. We've piloted here in West Yorkshire, and Leeds schools have benefited significantly from this Young Driver programme, and we're sort of pleased to be able to report that is going to continue as a mainstream intervention in the new financial year, supported by the Safety Camera Partnership, education, training and publicity, allocation of funding. The same for One Life Lost. That's a police-delivered engagement initiative piloted by Chief Inspector James Farrer, who's actually the roads policing lead for West Yorkshire. James developed that when he was a frontline operational road traffic officer, and that forms one element of the suite of interventions that colleagues across the local authority and other stakeholder organisations have committed to addressing the risks associated with young drivers.
Yeah, just to further what Paul's quite rightly said there about the One Life Lost delivery. What has also happened recently with that delivery is Chief Inspector James Farrer has actually managed to get the modules in terms of being able to get out to schools onto POLED. POLED is a system that is currently signed up to, I think it's 91% of schools in West Yorkshire. 92's have gone up then. But with that, what it does do is it highlights the significance of road safety and gives schools the opportunity to bring in elements such as One Life Lost. But James Farrer, Chief Inspector, has been pushing that. And like I say, that is now there. And there's a lot of really positive work through the entire delivery group around many elements. There's also some funding that has been provided to certain organisations that go into schools. So for example, the Naomi Cherry Goff Foundation recently got some Mayor Saver community funding, and they go in and they do actually do inputs to slightly younger age, so it's years 9 and 10 primarily. But there's a suite of opportunities to deliver to different school-age children, as well as those starting their journey.
And I think it's important to say that the Vision Zero board has also got a bit of a campaigning element to it, and we've agreed a suite of policy changes at a national level that we would like to see implemented. We have Dr Ian Greenwood on our board by design, because we want that lived experience, and together we are trying to achieve his ambition and the ambition of many road safety charities to get graduated driving licences, not just for young drivers but also for new drivers. And I was at the Labour Party conference on Sunday, was on the platform with Lillian Greenwood, who is the Minister under Louise Haigh, where we talked about the need for graduated driver licensing, and the Labour government seem open to thinking about that. And of course, one of our other asks was about having a national road safety strategy, which the Labour Party did develop in 2009. It was then abandoned. They have committed to a new road safety strategy, which was another of our political asks. There's a couple of other things that we're still going to be asking for, and so just so you get that reassurance, we're looking at this strategically, holistically, not just at a West Yorkshire level but also nationally.
Just to add about the TTC work, we are very keen to increase the number. We could buy extra sessions from TTC, but we have struggled to get into other colleges and secondary schools. So there is that plea that if there is that appetite, because we recognise they're going to be the most benefit to the course, but the education that goes on in secondary schools, we've just procured through West Yorkshire a new provider who will try and focus thinking ahead to those learning to drive. So that will be coming online in January, where we've bought extra sessions for that as well. And there is also opportunities to develop resources that we're doing in Leeds around actually communicating with parents around those messages as well as just reaching the young people. So there's a lot of work going on, and there's more we want to do. We recognise it's just getting the foot in the door in some settings as well.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to come in on the nuisance bikes question. So we have a new target in our action plan around nuisance bikes, so it wasn't there previously. So we're just starting that work with city centre management based specifically around nuisance bikes in the city centre pedestrianised areas. So I think that's the main focus of the work that we are looking to do. It is a national issue. It's come out from COVID, really, from food deliveries and the like. Specifically, I think is the major issue on those bikes. We're well aware that some of those bikes are not legal e-bikes. So we're just looking into the options at the moment in Leeds around that. The strategy and what we plan to do with it. But it's a partnership. We're working with the police closely on that matter as well.
And I just want to add on that the Mayor has funded all the districts to improve and enhance the number of bikes and training for officers to ride those bikes across the whole of West Yorkshire, so £480,000. I visited the Leeds off-road bike team about 2 months ago. Brilliant team. They've reduced bike nuisance by 11% in the first year that they've been in operation, so beginning to make some big inroads. I've asked the force if they'll fund some more some different bikes, because they can't chase young people in some circumstances because of the tyres of some of the bikes that they've got. It's a bit complicated, but we're working on it, and it's definitely a priority that the Mayor has and that we're holding the police to account on. And our last COM, which was last week, which is live streamed, you can get a copy of it if you want to watch it, which is our community outcomes meeting. Off-road bikes were on that agenda, and we did speak to the police, as I say, live at that meeting, and you can hear what they said.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, to commend two of the officers who are at this table, because I've worked with them on a number of things locally, and I'll just say that as a sort of not go into too many local examples, but to Gary Bartlett and to Nick Hunt, who have been absolutely brilliant in the work that we've done in the Harewood ward at trying to improve road safety. And Nick has spent more time than he cares to probably say, walking up and down the streets, looking at particular sites with me and discussing those. So I know that there's a commitment from the officers to see this through. A couple of quick questions. One of them was on prosecutions. How do we go about sharing that information and advertising where those prosecutions happen to make others aware? And I'm particularly thinking about sites where we know there are examples. You see sometimes those banners which say, so many 1,000 people speeding here, don't speed. How do we say, this many people have been prosecuted here, don't do this, we will catch you?
If I may, so as part of any schemes that we introduce as part of the CRSTS programme, we have to do a monitoring and evaluation exercise to justify the expenditure that we've done. So at the moment there's a piece of work that we're doing, so for each of the camera sites, both the community and the static and average and red light violations, the camera partnership have kindly given me that data. The intention as well is to use that data as, and I'm going to pinch a phrase that Paul's used, you said we did. And we're going to do that so that the community have said that we had a speeding concern here, we've reviewed it, we've got the camera out there, and in the first visit it captured this many deployments, the second one this, third, and to date we've caught this many people. And hopefully we'll start to get that message out that it's not being led by us as officers, it's being led by the community and yourselves. Some of these locations, or many of these locations where we are deploying cameras and the community vehicles. So at some stage I will be able to share with you the data of the locations within your ward, and therefore collectively we can share that and get that message out that we're here, we're trying to collectively reduce the number of injury collisions on the network, and these are the positive impacts. A lot of the data shows that there's a significant decline from the first visit to the third visit, and that's what we want to see. We can demonstrate this is not as a cash cow, this is about changing driver behaviour.
Thank you. That's also, just as a local ward member, that's something we do as well, and we put those stats out that we can get off the police, which is it's proven to be very popular with residents because obviously they want to see us actioning things. I just wonder if on that the police want to come in at all.
No. Yeah, I mean, our number of policing teams you've perhaps seen on X as well, where they publicise the work. The PCSOs are often out with the SIDS machines and speed indication devices, and they'll publicise that, the number of people that they've stopped engaged with, and the messaging as well. So, yeah, again, it's a broad brush across the whole of the partnership just to make sure that information is going out.
Thank you. And it's good, the promotion of the bikes that are being seized and crushed as well. That's helpful to see in our communities. Did you have a follow-up?
I did, Chair, if that's okay. So then when we think about this, there's obviously the financial element. I wrote to Council last week, and I'm certain that one of the officers wrote a nice reply in their written answers to the questions, which was about the fines and the funding that comes from these fines. At the moment, and I think the Deputy Mayor hit on it there, this generates income, but we don't keep it, is what was being said. I wrote to the executive member asking if he'd join me in my letter to the Minister, saying that where this funding is generated locally, it should be returned locally so it can be used for enforcement schemes. And not all of those enforcement schemes will mean more cameras. Some of that is going to be about education, some of this is going to be about new crossings, some of it is going to be about other work. What can we do to make sure that the government adopt that approach and don't stick it in the funding formula that goes to police, but actually where this money is raised in communities, it's there to benefit communities and is ring-fenced for that purpose?
I mean, we need to be writing to government. I have to say there's a lot of money that West Yorkshire Police bring in that we don't get to keep. So Proceeds of Crime Act, millions and millions of pounds. The government takes 50% before, as soon as we've got it, the government takes 50%. And then money has to go to other places, CPS. Anyone involved in the prosecution of those individuals, they also get a slice. And then the police are left with, I'd like to say the crumbs, but it's probably a loaf of bread. if you think about how much money we do get to keep, but it's nothing like the money that we actually raise. So it's a problem across the system. I have raised it with Yvette Cooper, by the way, and so we'll continue to do our campaigning.
If I could, and using Nick's example here, so I know we've put a speed camera in Scarcroft. That speed camera, we went in middle of March, went in through July, so what's that, 3 months? 7,500 people who were fined, were caught speeding. Let's call it a 30 quid fine for each. That's £225,000. If I'm generous and say that we double it for the year, that comes to £450,000. That community around there who are impacted by that speed will see absolutely naff all of, because it will go into the pot. Now, I appreciate it may go out and be filtered out for other schemes, but the view is they have the problem there, ring fencing it for those areas. So I'm heartened by what the Deputy Mayor said about having those conversations with the Home Secretary, but that's a change that would be the ultimate localism. You're putting more funding into those areas to deliver more road safety in a very real and visible way.
I really do appreciate the spirit in which that aspiration is articulated there, but can I perhaps just bring some clarity to the situation around all traffic offences, not just camera ones? So, we process those offences. Let's say we process 100 offences. We know from experience that 20% will end up in court. If there's a fine applied at court, all that fine goes to the Treasury. If somebody is dealt with by way of a fixed penalty ticket and they pay their £100 and receive 3 points, the £100 goes directly to the Treasury. In relation... No, I just... Right. There are generally about 45 out of the 100 which will go down the education route and be offered an out-of-court disposal and attend a course. We are allowed to recover some cost from the fee that they pay to undertake that course, and that has to pay for the back office processing of the offending and the camera infrastructure in most cases. The model is based on being, at best, cost neutral. In the event that there is a modest surplus in West Yorkshire, because we, I would argue, have a quite efficient structure in terms of how we deliver this process, the surplus that's generated goes directly back into additional activity aimed at making the road safer. So the principle that you've got there is what we currently work to. I'm personally and professionally against a notion of put more cameras in because it'll generate more income and we get to keep it. I don't think that's the right way to go. It needs to be data-led where we actually enforce and install cameras. But it's not quite as simplistic as using all the revenue simply to reinvest. That there's more than just the camera to pay for in terms of processing offences.
I don't want to take up loads of time to say, Chair, so the last thing I'll probably say on this is I think we're in agreement here, but you possibly can't say that we're in agreement here because of the way some of the funding formula has to be. So I appreciate that there's back office costs and things like that. I guess what I'm saying is that requires a change, and it's the government that can deliver that change, and that's something that I think we could and should be pushing on. And the point that you make is not that, and I'm not advocating for putting speed cameras in as a cash cow. I don't agree with that at all. What I am saying is that where it goes in and you can then say, by the way, we funded that crossing down the road outside that school from the fines from the speed camera that's there. I think that's a really great way of saving the police money, of saving this council money, and raising awareness for people locally, and the money not going in the big pot where people just distrust government. I'll probably not say any more on it, Chair, because you've got other questions.
Could I just offer an avenue perhaps to take this issue forward? The Police Crime and Sentencing Act, which was enshrined in 2022, created the primary legislation around this cash flow process, if you like. Secondary legislation is currently being considered to actually do the detail around what that will look like in practice. It might be relevant to engage that process to try and inform some of the decision making around the statutory instruments that will deliver the final outcome from that primary legislation.
Lovely. We'll swing back to that when we come on to the actions, conclusions, recommendations subsection of this. We've got about 4 minutes of open discussion left, and I've got Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Chair. I'll come back to this because I've mentioned it before, but under enforcement on page 46, there is something called distractions. And mobile phones are not mentioned here. I assume they're a distraction. And it seems to me that every time you draw up at a set of traffic lights, the person on the left or the right is looking down at a mobile phone, texting often or even speaking. And it seems to me that the police do nothing because they say, oh, we've got to see them doing it, and we never do. So what? The Deputy Mayor said she was hoping to have a road safety strategy, or the government is, and she was holding the police to account. Well, can she get them to prosecute some more people for this offence, please?
As briefly as possible in response, please.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the principle of policing is that you can only prosecute and deal with what you can see in front of you, and where we don't see it, then clearly that'll be some significant problems. Colleagues will know better, but there are some, I believe, some cameras that have been introduced nationwide. You might have seen in the media that'll actually capture that kind of activity. And seem to have good success rates across the country. I'm not sure that it's been considered yet here in West Yorkshire. Would learn if anyone wants to.
The legislation around mobile phone enforcement is not straightforward. It's not an offence in this country to hold a phone in your hand whilst you're at the wheel. It's an offence to use. The challenge for us is in the way that legislation was crafted, because we have to prove use. It's not accurate to say we don't do any of these offences. In the year to the end of July, we prosecuted in the Leeds district 520 mobile phone use offences. We're committed to doing it. My colleague quite rightly highlights there's some technology that can potentially identify offences, but we still have to prove it. And having a camera at the roadside which captures somebody holding a phone only proves the holding a phone. It doesn't prove the using it. And I know I'm into the minutiae of legislative requirements, but it's very significant from an enforcement point of view. That's not our making. That was in the way the legislation was crafted, so we have to work with that. But I agree, where we have the evidence and we can prove use, we're as committed as anybody else to dealing with that as an offence.
Very briefly, to say that I appreciate the difficulties with it, but when the police had traffic police, they had more cars on the road, didn't they? And it just strikes me that if you're doing 34 in a 30 zone, you'll get fined. If you text, you won't.
The evidence doesn't bear that out, but we'll stop it there.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to close the open discussion there. I had 375 questions, so I will put those in an email to all of you, and then you can put it as and how. What I will say, though, is that as long as Becky doesn't glare at me because it's entirely unacceptable, I will put those responses to questions in the next pack, because what I don't want to do is end up with, when I say, like I did earlier to Councillor Lay, that then it is taken out of the public domain. That doesn't feel fair. So, would any of our partners or officers like to make any closing remarks? No? Okie dokie. In which case, I will make all of the closing remarks, which is around what actions we want to do. And you're absolutely fine. Thank you very much for coming, Alison. That's all right. This is what happens when you're so very important, Deputy Mayor. Okay, so the Vision Zero pledge. We've got on our desks a copy of said Vision Zero pledge, which you can either sign electronically using the QR code, or you can write by hand and give to Gillian and Rosie. Would you like to just give us 30 seconds of what the pledge actually is about and for? Thank you.
So we designed the pledge to lead by example. We were very aware of the awareness of Vision Zero can get muddled up with Net Zero, and actually we really wanted to sharpen first the council staff awareness of what Vision Zero is and what it would mean for them, but also that wider their families, people that they know about, because it is everyone's responsibility to stay safe on our roads. So we wanted everyone to make that pledge to do what they could and hold themselves responsible. So the pledge is not just for drivers, it's for pedestrians, for anyone who work. Initially, we launched our pledge for council staff so that anyone who's working for the council is signed up to and understands our aspiration and is working towards it.
Thank you. And we will have a comfort break in a couple of minutes. So if people can sign that pledge if they would like to, it would be great to get some buy-in from councillors and officers, of course, before you head out. I'd like to draw people's attention to Dr. Ian Greenwood's letter on page 83. He has certain priorities that he'd like to be included in the Vision Zero. I don't know why I can't read these sentences. The Parliamentary Advisory Committee for Transport Safety. He'd also like to see the graduated driving licence, which obviously we've had mentioned here as well today. And he has requested that as a board, we feel comfortable, or if we feel comfortable, writing to that end to ministers around graduated driving licences. Obviously, it hasn't been a massive feature of the debate today, but I'm sure you've all read the papers and read his letter. I would be very comfortable for us to write that letter, but I would like to see nods from around the board as to whether or not you're happy for us to promote the use of graduated driving licences. Is that, yeah, you can speak?
Sorry, I don't want to be a blocker here, but I don't feel I personally know enough about the policy to advocate for it. I'd certainly be happy to write to find out, you know, where it's at and for there to be a useful discussion around it. But yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to echo those points. I wouldn't be supportive of that at the minute without a discussion around it. I'm happy to do anything to tackle road deaths, and obviously younger drivers do disproportionately cause a lot of those. But if we are looking at a kind of whole package, then I would like to see some kind of reform to maybe drivers over the age of 85 or something like that, which isn't covered by the focus of this. So we could definitely have that discussion at some point, but I don't think we've covered it enough today for me to think we should take that forward at the minute.
And is that with the agreement of the rest of the board that we don't for now, but we look to provide ourselves with further discussion time on it? We have got a work schedule that means that we can add that in. Councillor Lay?
Yes, that's what I was going to say. Some of us have obviously been on the board for a while and understand, but there are new members who perhaps want to go through it.
Okie doke. Well, we'll bump that then to the next section. The other thing that I wondered whether we wanted to touch on, which again is in my questions but not in that hasn't been part of the debate today, is around the drug and alcohol testing for our staff, Gary, and as well as the drug and alcohol testing, the then support around the potential for addiction, etc., with our staff. Do you mind just giving a 2-minute update on where we are with that, please?
Yeah, certainly, Chair. So we work with contractors very significantly, and they have very clear guidelines around drug testing on site and for their employees. Currently, we don't seem to have that within Leeds City Council. And if you recall from my introductory comments, For us, it's about Leeds City Council setting an example for others, and that's why I want you to sign the pledge and such like. So we're making progress internally with relevant teams, but if Scrutiny were minded to think that it would be good to have a sound drink and drug testing policy for our drivers in the City Council, your support would be appreciated. And it's like everything else, to a large extent, that we've talked about today. We're not trying to persecute or pick people out. What we're trying to do is make them safe on the highway, and obviously people that they might interact with on the highway as well. And if there are underlying circumstances which you're alluding to, Chair, then there needs to be provisions in place to assist. This is not about, as I say, trying to prosecute or persecute anybody. It's just if you get, and it's like all the things we've talked about this morning, ultimately, we don't want to catch anybody speeding or doing something wrong on the highway. It's about changing behaviours.
So in a similar vein, is that something that the Scrutiny Board would like to support?
Forgive asking the question. Has that been through HR and the unions yet before that's come here?
That's the process it's going through.
I'm comfortable for it to come back at a later date, but not at this stage. If that's okay, Chair, that would be my proposition.
Yes, I'd want to know more. In the same vein that we want to know more about graduated driving licences and affordable housing on a different subject, I'd want to know more. I'd like somebody to be the devil's advocate and play the devil's advocate for staff, because I'd want to know, and I'm sure that Gary would reassure us that it isn't about punitive, and it is about support, and it is about education, it is about prevention, and all of the things I'd want it to be as a Liberal with a small L, rather than punitive and you were caught with alcohol or drugs in your body and you came to work and you're going to be fired. So I'd want to know that sort of stuff is protecting members of staff as well from misuse of inappropriate power.
Might be worth inviting people from like the railway, where they have these policies in place and actually are incredibly effective at supporting staff around alcohol use and such like. Okay, so it's a no to both of those suggestions for now, but with a new action to look at how we can discuss those further in order to come to a conclusion of whether we want to go back to those original actions. Yeah? Councillor Dye?
Sorry, that was just my support for that position.
Just waving at me, just to G me up. Good, excellent. Councillor Robinson?
In our efforts to come back on those items, could I ask us to look again at the stuff around the funding and the request that we were talking about that goes into the Home Secretary, into the Transport Minister around this and about that delegation of funding? I appreciate I raised it, so I'm biased in suggesting that that goes forward, but it seemed to be that the Deputy Mayor was saying that some conversations had been had, and again, in the spirit of wanting to know more and how we can collaborate on a position, I'd be keen to take that forward in the future, Chair.
And how does the board feel about that? Is that quite comfortable? Excellent. Well, what I'll do then is I will once again go away with Becky, work out how we can take that forward, how we can work on that education piece for ourselves around the other bits, and then we'll pull something together and email it out to the board members. One thing that I think we probably can all agree on, however, is that we are going to look to support via the Scrutiny account on X, putting out and amplifying the Vision Zero social media stuff. I take it we are all in agreement about that. Councillor Dye's waving at me again. Good. Perfect. In which case, I'm going to call for a comfort break now, and we'll come back in at 1:45, please. Thanks. coming back together. We're now moving on to agenda item number 9, which is the Connecting Leeds consultation and engagement item. The 2023-2024 Scrutiny Board recommended that this item was considered in this municipal year, and members again agreed they wished to take this forward in June 2024. The report recognises the significant improvements that have been made over recent years in consultation and engagement through the Connecting Leeds team. What we are being asked to consider today is how the current team operates and how that journey of improvement can continue to evolve. I'm keen to hear from officers about current practice and from members about some of the suggestions you have about strengthening this work based on your experience of engagement and with communities in your area. That said, given the limited time available, can I ask that we all try and maintain a focus on the strategic approach to consultation and try to avoid very detailed discussion about the intricacies of specific consultations in your ward. Who'd like to make some introductory comments? Thank you, Gary.
I'll be very brief, Chair. You've covered off that this is our update on our work in this area. For councillors that have been around since before 2016, I would hope that you would recognise the positive comments that you've made in terms of the improvements that we've made in terms of how we try to engage and consult with people on certainly our major schemes, more major schemes in recent times. And I'll just make this comment a bit flippantly, but not that I'm competitive, but we get a level of response to our schemes that are significantly higher than West Yorkshire when they do their West Yorkshire consultations. So that tells me that we're getting something right. Having said that, we know it's not perfect, and we will continuously improve and learn from our experiences and feedback, particularly from local ward members. So please do tell us where it's not going quite right. And a comment's been made today already about social influencing and influencers. And I think that's something that we probably do need to do a bit more around, although I think you've got a flavour that we do some. But I'll leave it there, Chair, and allow members to ask my colleagues and I questions.
Councillor Carlo.
Thank you. I've obviously been involved a little bit in some of the schemes as lead member of Active Travel in the past, and there's a couple of bits I just wanted to ask for kind of an update on how we're feeling. There's a couple of things really, because I think on some of the schemes we've seen really positive work in getting what I would call a valid consultation response, so making sure that what we have is in some way representative of the community. Gender could be one aspect of looking at that. For instance, we had very typically more men respond than women, and there should be no reason for that. And I think there's a number of schemes, I think maybe it was the Connecting West Leeds scheme in my own ward, that we ended up with actually more women responding than men, which is a real positive. So I just wondered how that's going on other wider schemes. And also on some of the ones where there've been quite difficult conversations with residents around things like what we call the active travel neighbourhoods that we had. We don't necessarily do those anymore in that way, but it was quite hard to cipher through all the responses we were getting, because it was quite a political issue at the time, of what was the actual view on the ground. And we had a lot of work through involving people like Leeds, involving people who went and actually knocked on people's doors and asked what they thought of the changes to their road to try and get through. And I just wondered how we think both the changes we've made in trying to make sure we're getting a representative view, and how we're making sure we're getting the view from people on the ground and not a distorted view, how we've seen that come forward in the most recent consultations we've put through.
I'll do my best to answer this for you. So I remember I worked on that Connecting West Leeds consultation with you, Councillor, and yeah, and actually we saw a 50-50 representation, male and female, for that scheme, so that was great. It's an ongoing process, and we don't always get it right for every scheme. Sometimes we still see imbalances between male and female, and other, EDI issues as well. But what we do is sort of halfway through when a consultation's live is we look at the data and we see in terms of where we're getting responses from, whether that's geographically, whether it's male, female, etc. We can look at the diversity figures, and then what we do is we, as much as possible, adapt the marketing to do that. For the A660 corridor, which is made up of a lot of a student population, we weren't getting those figures through, and it was actually really hard to get them to engage with us. So we did some digital online advertising that typically pictured more like an image of students walking along with a rucksack to university. So in that circumstance, we used an image that, you know, was more relatable perhaps to a student, but it's not perfect, and it's hard work, and I think it's the same for a lot of organisations that are doing consultation, that they face those issues. Wasn't quite sure how to answer the ATN question. I wasn't quite sure on that one.
I think so have a go at that. In terms of the analysis that we can do afterwards, because we've got that richness of data, we ask for postcodes, we understand where people are from, we can disaggregate the data and understand the views, how the views differ from the people who live in the area to those who are maybe just commenting wider, you know, especially on that ATN type of discussion. We had some people commenting from London, you know, it was very much, it sort of caught that national debate side, so we can look at that and in our analysis and understanding, and when we report back to decision makers, either Gary's delegated officer or through Councillor Pryor as our exec member, we split that up and show how those different views are there, so we can make decisions based on an analysis of the data.
Any other comments from members? Councillor Shazad?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And just on consultations, we've had one regards the junction we had in Meanwood, which we as councillors did support, but the response by a lot of the residents was, we've gone to the consultations, they had some in person, they had email addresses to obviously to write to Connecting Leeds, but what happened is that they felt they never got an adequate enough response. Even though obviously the scheme's gone ahead and everything, some people feel like their concerns, it was pointless having a consultation if they never got a response or their concerns were not heard. So maybe after the consultation, if there's some sort of review or some sort of letter or something that can be shared that can say, we've had so many responses to the consultation. In a lot of cases, you'd get probably about 100 people raising exactly the same concerns. But and I know individually we can't go back and email every single person because it'll take up a lot of staff time. But maybe if there was something that was sent out on the Connecting Leeds website and maybe shared with the ward councillors, we could then put it up like there was about 100 people who suggested this, but this is our reason why we've not taken that into consideration, or we've taken into consideration, but we don't feel like it's a reason for altering the scheme or doing something differently as requested. So that was some of the feedback that we've got, that they feel like they take part in these consultations, but they're not heard. And the reason why they feel that is because they don't get a response back. And obviously we can't respond to everyone. Sometimes you get 2,000, 3,000 responses, and you can't respond to everyone individually, can you? So any solution would be great.
Well done for very effectively utilising a local issue without straying into local casework. Good work. Just while they decide who's going to talk next.
I think it's absolutely a valid point, and we'll take it away. I think it's a big service, Highways and Transportation, and there are various teams that do consultations and engagement, and certainly where Joe and her team are directly involved, then a sort of after report, or you said, and this is what we're doing type report is produced. But what you're saying is that wasn't done on that particular scheme, which Joe and the team weren't necessarily directly involved in. And so I think there's a learning lesson there for us to take away. Ultimately, there would have been a report that came to me on that one. In fact, because of the contentious nature of it, I do remember it quite well. And all the representations, the different representations would have been made in the report, which is published. I make a point to the team that virtually all the decisions I take are published, so there's complete transparency. Only sort of basic admin ones or really confidential ones that I won't publish, but I try to publish every single one, which is then available to everybody to have a look at. And we know that they're looked at because the press often contact us within 12 to 24 hours on some of them. But we'll take the point away, and we'll change processes as appropriate. Yeah, please.
If I can just add, it is normal practice that we would publish, you said, and this is what the decisions that we've now made on Commonplace, but it might not have happened for Meanwood. I need to go back and actually check that. But I will reinforce that with everybody, that we do need to do that. And actually, maybe when we do that, is contact yourselves, your local councillors, and say it's now actually live if you want that information. I'm not sure we will have done that, so we'll take that back.
That feels like a really pertinent point, if I can just squeeze in with Chair's privilege. It feels like a really pertinent point there, that getting it back to members, because actually we can then put it on social media and such like. And it's, I think for me, the thing that I would pick up from Councillor Shazad's point is that it's not just about you said we did, it's about you said this is why we couldn't do as well. Because some of the comments they statutorily aren't relevant, or it's impossible to do that thing. So it's not just you said we did, it's you said we didn't do. Thank you.
Yeah, Chair. So if people do respond via the Commonplace site and register and leave an email address on there, then as a matter of course we should update them through that. So I kind of haven't commented on our own schemes myself, so I don't know if it always works that process, but if members have used it, I think that you should recognise that you get that feedback, and there's, you know, we do the...
Let's check that.
We'll check that.
Yeah.
It might go to one of those updates or whatever it is in other email providers are available. Councillor Lay.
I don't need to ask a question. Councillor Shazad essentially asked the same question around local feedback, etc., after the initial consultation. So I will just ask... No, I won't ask another question because I don't think you're the right people to answer it.
Thanks for your input. Okay. Good. Okay. Firstly, as we have about 30 seconds, I would like to say thank you very much live and in the public arena for how swiftly you guys managed to change the report based on my comments. I am very, very grateful for the way that officers respond to the scrutiny board generally, to bring back information and make it so that the reports that we get here for our reading gives us the most possible detail. I was also really pleased to see that the update about putting a free text box in on point 10. I think that will provide us with some really interesting information around why people didn't understand stuff. I'd also like to just draw attention to how supportive I am of the bite-sized element. I asked officers, just for the benefit of the board and anyone watching online, I asked officers to put in an example, which is on the appendix, of a slice of a consultation, which is where you get the information and then a simple question based on the information you've given. And rather than having to digest reams of information and then remember it and pull back, I think it's a really high quality approach that is far more inclusive than other consultations. I will, again, for the maximising research point 5, I will just for the purpose of the minutes say again that I'd really encourage us to be using anchor networks. We have so many staff in our city that work within those anchor network organisations, and being able to use those as distributors. And again, Gary picked up on it, but he also knows my passion for social media influencers. Gary, not social influencers. So yeah, I will also, for the purposes of the minutes, raise that. And then my final point is around the demographic element that Councillor Carlisle also picked up on, and us being able to make sure that we are increasing not just the area demographics, but the protected characteristic demographics as well. And then also working on the conclusions and how we utilise an understanding of the demographics that have put into the consultation to then work out what our conclusions are, both from who has responded but also who hasn't. And we can use different information from the census on protected characteristics. We can use information from research that says, for example, that certain organisations, certain parts of, for example, the LGBT community are less likely to engage because actually there is a fear around organised and authorities and all that sort of stuff. So we need to make sure that our conclusions being drawn are able to stand up to scrutiny around who isn't as well as who is answering our consultations. And I think from me, that's everything. I'm excited I got to ask some questions on this one. Anyone else got any final comments, members, at all? No? In which case, our task was to note the content of the report, which I'm happy we have noted. And I think we've made some suggestions of potential improvements. So we've covered off the recommendations. Okay. Lovely. In which case, thank you very much, folks, for coming. And we'll move straight on to item 10, which is the work programme. Would you like to go through that?
If I can just ask members to note the draft work programme at page 95 in your schedule, and if you have comments to feedback, I'll pick up the requests that come out of today and obviously provide an amended version shortly. Appended to the work programme are also the scrutiny statement and ministerial letter that were referenced in the minutes. Again, those will be appended to the Executive Board agenda for October the 16th as well, so that formal recommendation has gone forward as requested. The only other thing to note is that Gillian just caught me as she was leaving to say if anybody wants to complete the pledge in hard form on the leaflets you've been given, I can provide those to her and she will upload them onto the system on your behalf if that's easier than doing QR codes.
So before I close that agenda item, did anyone have any comments on the letter, etc., that we've been studiously working on behind the scenes, or is everyone comfortable with that? Happy? Excellent. In which case, the next meeting of the Scrutiny Board will take place on the 6th of November, and as per request from the board, we're amending the time, so the pre-meeting for board members will be at 10, with the live webcast version beginning at 10:15 a.m. Thank you very much. It was just a request from board members that they would like it to be earlier. It works for me. It fits in better with school runs, if I'm honest. Yeah.
Oh, right, correct.
Yeah.
Just this one. Okay.
No. All righty. Councillor Shazad.
We had the extra meeting on affordable housing, but we never had many people turn up, so is that you're going to be sending it out to more members?
Councillor Shazad, you've outed yourself in a public meeting for not showing up early enough. I've said to members that I will provide a Teams link as well, in order that if they can't possibly attend in person, then they can utilise that opportunity as well. But yeah, the more people we can get there, the better. Thank you very much. All right then, I'll close this meeting. Thank you.